Then he turned to the canoe while she drew on her stocking and moccasin. He was trembling. A maddening joy pounded in his brain. Jeanne's voice came to him sweetly, with a shyness in it that made him feel like a boy. He was glad that the night concealed his face. He would have given words to have seen Jeanne's. "I am ready," she said. He carried her to the bow of the canoe, and fixed her among the robes, arranging a place for her head so that she might sleep if she wished. For the first time the light was so that he could see her plainly as she nestled back in the place made for her. Their eyes met for a moment. "You must sleep," he urged. "I shall paddle all night." "You are sure that Pierre is not badly hurt?" she asked, tremulously. "You would not keep the truth from me?" "He was not more than stunned," assured Philip. "It is impossible that his wound should prove serious. Only there was no time to lose, and I came without him. He will follow us soon." He took his position in the stern, and Jeanne lay back among the bearskins. For a long time after that Philip paddled in silence. He had hoped that Jeanne would give him an opportunity to continue their conversation, in spite of his advice to her to secure what rest she could. But there came no promise from the bow of the canoe. After half an hour he guessed that Jeanne had taken him at his word and was asleep. It was disappointing, and yet there came a pleasurable throb with his disappointment. Jeanne trusted him. She was sleeping under his protection as sweetly as a child. Fear of her enemies no longer kept her awake or filled her with terror. This night, under these stars, with the wilderness all about them, she had given herself into his keeping. His cheeks burned. He dipped his paddle noiselessly, so that he might not interrupt her slumber. Each moment added to the fullness of his joy, and he wished that he might only see her face, hidden in the darkness of her hair and the bare robes. The silence no longer seemed a silence to him. It was filled with the beating of his heart, the singing of his love, a gentle sigh now and then that came like a deeper breath between Jeanne's sweet lips. It was a silence that pulsated with a voiceless and intoxicating life for him, and he was happy. In these moments, when even their voices were stilled, Jeanne belonged to him, and to him alone. He could feel the warmth of her presence. He felt still the thrill of her breast against his own, the touch of her hair upon his lips, the gentle clinging of her arms. The spirit of her moved, and sat awake, and talked with him, just as the old spirit of his dreams had communed with him 1,000 times in his loneliness. Dreams were at an end. Now had come reality. He looked up into the sky. The moon had dropped below the southwestern forests, and there were only the stars above him, filling a gray-blue vault in which there was not even the lingering mist of a cloud. It was a beautifully clear night, and he wondered how the light fell so that it did not reveal Jeanne in her nest. The thought that came to him then set his heart tingling and made his face radiant. Even the stars were guarding Jeanne, and refused to disclose the mystery of her slumber. He laughed within himself. His being throbbed, and suddenly a voice seemed to cry softly, trembling in its joy: "Jeanne, Jeanne, my beloved Jeanne!" With horror Philip caught himself too late. He had spoken the words aloud. For an instant reality had transformed itself into the old dream, and his dream spirit had called to its mate for the first time in words. Appalled at what he had said, Philip bent over and listened. He heard Jeanne's breathing. It was deeper than before. She was surely asleep. He straightened himself and resumed his paddling. He was glad now that he had spoken. Jeanne seemed nearer to him after those words. Before this night he never realized how beautiful the wilderness was, how complete it could be. It had offered him visions of new life, but these visions had never quite shut out the memories of old pain. He watched and listened. The water rippled behind his canoe. It trickled in a soothing cadence after each dip of his paddle. He heard the gentle murmur of it among the reeds and grasses, and now and then the gurgling laughter of it, like the faintest tinkling of dainty bells. He had never understood it before. He had never joined in its happiness. The night sounds came to him with a different meaning, filled him with different sensations. As he slipped quietly around a bend in the river, he heard a splashing ahead of him, and knew that a moose was feeding, belly deep in the water. At other times the sound would have set his fingers itching for a rifle, but now it was a part of the music of the night. Later he heard the crashing of a heavy body along the shore, and in the distance the lonely howl of a wolf. He listened to the sounds with a quiet pleasure, instead of creeping thrills which they once sent through him. Every sound spoke of Jeanne and her world, into which each stroke of his paddle carried them a little deeper. And yet the truth could not but come to him that Jeanne was but a stranger. She was a creature of mystery, as she lay there asleep in the bow of the canoe. He loved her, and yet he did not know her. He confessed to himself, as the night lengthened, that he would be glad when morning came. Jeanne would clear up a half of his perplexities then, perhaps all of them. He would at least learn more about herself and the reason for the attack at Fort Churchill. He paddled for another hour, and then looked at his watch by the light of a match. It was 3:00. Jeanne had not moved, but as the match burned out between his fingers she startled him by speaking. "Is it nearly morning, M'sieur?" "An hour until dawn," said Philip. "You have been sleeping a long time." Her name was on his lips, but he found it a little more difficult to speak now. And yet there was a gentleness in Jeanne's "M'sieur" which encouraged him. "Are you getting hungry?" he asked. "Pierre and my father always ask me that when they are starving," replied Jeanne, sitting erect in her nest so that Philip saw her face and the shimmer of her hair. "There is everything to eat in the pack, M'sieur Philip, even to a bottle of olives." "Good!" cried Philip, delighted. "But won't you please cut out that 'M'sieur'? My greatest weakness is a desire to be called by my first name. Will you?" "If it pleases you," said Jeanne. "There is everything there to eat, and I will make you a cup of coffee, M'sieur—" "What?" "Philip." There was a ripple of laughter in the girl's voice. Philip fairly trembled. "You were prepared for this journey," he said. "You were going to leave after you saw me on the rock. I have been wondering why you took enough interest in me—" He knew that he was blundering, and in the darkness his face turned red. Jeanne's tact was delightful. "We were curious about you," she said, with bewitching candor. "Pierre is the most inquisitive creature in the world, and I wanted to thank you for returning my handkerchief. I'm sorry you didn't find a bit of lace which I lost at the same time." "I did!" exclaimed Philip. He bit his tongue, and cursed himself at this fresh break. Jeanne was silent. After a moment she said: "Shall I make you some coffee?" "Will you be able to do it? Your foot—" "I had forgotten that," she said. "It doesn't hurt any more. But I can show you how." Her unaffected ingenuousness, the sweetness of her voice, The simplicity and ease of her manner delighted M.